Often I'm actually just playing around, like just creating constant melodies. So one time I was playing and this simple melody came along. It goes like this. So I'm playing along and those words start coming with the melody. You give me feet like a deer so I can climb these mountains. You raise me up on the heights so I can overcome. And I'm like, where's that scripture? And so I look it up and it's Psalm 18. So I begin to meditate on Psalm 18 and that's how the song is written. I basically just started with a few phrases from a scripture and a melody, and then I just begin to focus until the song is formed. And sometimes I'm just, this Bible is just sitting here and it's just like flipped open and I'm like, that's a nice psalm. And I just start writing a song to it. It can happen like that. But every time it's kind of different. I'm originally from Canada, actually, but I've been in Israel for many years already. So since 2008 is when I basically made it my home because I met my wife that year. When it comes to like actually playing music, it's kind of ironic because I come from a family of musical people. Like my mom was in a church, she was like the pianist and the organ player. So in a sense, she was leading the worship. She wasn't singing, but she was playing. And my dad was singing in the quartets, and so there was music around. And my brother and my sister were doing special numbers. We called it special numbers, or, in the middle of church service where they would do a special song, and my mom would play the piano, and my sister would sing, or my brother. And my brother even like started playing piano. But for me, I took the piano lessons when I was 5 years old. My parents said, hey, you're 5 years old now, you can take some piano lessons with your Aunt Bertha. So I was like, okay, so a couple months went down the road and I would just kind of fiddle around and play things as fast as I could. And they finally I remember they just said to me, it's not really working out. It's okay. You don't need to take piano lessons. So from that moment on, I just pretty much assumed that I don't have any musical abilities. And so I was like the one person in the family, at least in my mind, who had no musical talent or couldn't sing, couldn't play an instrument. And so that went on for a long time. When I was 7 years old, my dad brought home a cassette tape of Keith Green, and his music just, right away excited me. So I started to love music at that point and love to worship. I would play it on this little tape player like this with really little speakers. It wasn't that big, but I would play it on there, crank it as loud as it would go, and I would dance around my room like a wild man, just jumping so high, so full of joy, I couldn't contain it. But it was all, nobody knew. We didn't dance in church or anything like that, so it wasn't something public at all that I ever saw, is emotion like that. I never saw it expressed publicly. But in the privacy of my room, I would just be so full of joy and so overwhelmed with the power and the beauty of Elohim that I would just dance like crazy. Music took on a whole new level because music I knew really more was like singing hymns at church, which didn't have the same heart energy, emotion, intensity. Then I discovered this music. I remember in my teen years, I kind of lost that freedom. And it wasn't till I was like about 17 or 18, I went and explored this charismatic church and everybody was dancing, and I remember feeling awkward and I couldn't dance. Even though as a kid I could. I'd lost that freedom. So I had to rediscover it, you know. That ability to just let your emotions come out freely. But then when I was 15 or 16, I got back into Keith Green music, you know, years later. And it just so inspired me again, like how he would play the piano, that I really wanted to learn piano. And so my parents had this songbook from like the notes for Keith Green's music. And I took this one song called You Are the One. And I knew where like on the sheet music where C was. And from there I could figure out all the notes. So note by note, I figured out each note. And it took me a long time, but I could play the whole song. And so that was like kind of like my first accomplishment. And I was about 15 or 16. And then my brother took me aside one day and he said, "Here, I'll just show you the basics of music." And so in about a half an hour, he showed me the basic structure of music. And that was all I needed to send me off flying, you know. So I just began to explore the piano as a way to express emotion. So I learned to express the language of the heart, you know, just by exploring the piano. So these chord progressions make me feel like this, or these notes they make these minor keys make me sad. And so that's how it kind of developed, really on its own. My relationship with the Father was kind of a struggle, because I think I was caught up in a lot of religious performance. But it was interesting how the music would kind of allow me to get past that. In fact, I think it was why I even struggled with depression somewhat as a teenager. And it was strange how when I would play music, it would like lift off of me. So I related best, I think, to the Father through music. But I had to come to this realization that I was completely helpless, and I really was broken, and I needed Yeshua. And that was a long process, because, you know, on the outside I could look like a really good, well-behaved kid, but I actually really struggled with rejection and performance. And it's been a long journey to be confident in the Father's love. When I was maybe almost turning 30, it was like a midlife crisis for me. Only it wasn't my middle of my life. But, you know, I was working at the same job for almost 10 years. And I couldn't settle down. People around me that I worked with were getting married, buying houses, having kids, getting more and more, you know, established in their lives. I'd gone from like conservative Christianity to like charismatic Christianity, and I still felt like there's more. I'm still missing something. And one day, after almost 10 years at the same job, a desk job, you know, pushing buttons, writing down numbers, which is really not me, all of a sudden I just I couldn't work anymore. I couldn't do it anymore. And I literally got in my car on my break and started driving away from work, and thinking I'm freaked out because I know I can't go back, but I'm so scared of losing that security of the job. And so I talked to some people that night, and so I gave my notice the next day, and that was it. Just in one day it all changed. And then I was like, what do? I guess I'll go traveling. I always wanted to travel. So I contacted all the people I knew in Europe, and just for a couple months went around traveling, visiting them. And then I went home and basically got rid of the place I was renting, and made it like full time for 3.5 years. I went traveling. Went to 40 countries. I didn't have to experience really the world to realize I didn't really want it, but I got to see it. I mean, just for fun, I got a job in a pub, in a nightclub, just for a couple weeks, and just experience the world. I was so sheltered, and it was a chance for me to really get out of that bubble. And after about 3.5 years, my faith was not so stable anymore, and I was a bit shaky and asking a lot of questions, and it was a real hard time for me in the asking those hard questions right to the core of my being. And I think it's healthy to go through that, but it's not necessarily easy. But I went through it in that time, and it was a process. The Father took me down. He broke me down to like nothing so that he could rebuild me anew. And from that point, it was like he started rebuilding me. And then I ended up going to Israel. And near the end of all my travels, I thought, you know what? I'd met so many Israelis, and they're like, come visit. And I was like, I gotta see the 3D Bible, So I went to Israel, and right away I felt all of this electricity, such an incredible sense of destiny. I had all these thoughts that my wife was here, and I thought, I'm going crazy, but we'll see, So I realized I'm not really gonna be able to stay here, so I went back home. And I tried to go back to normal life and got back my old job. But I said, just start me at part-time. And so they thought eventually I'd get back into the groove of things, but I never did. And I kept thinking about Israel. And finally I quit again and went back to Israel. And that's when I really began to understand like who I am and how much I'm connected to the land of Israel. It actually really revived my faith, and it made it fresh and new, because I really got this new Hebraic perspective on Jesus, and started to call him by his Hebrew name, Yeshua. Started to realize how wonderful the Shabbat and the feasts are, because those are the things that he celebrated. It wasn't a legalistic thing at all. It was from the heart. I saw life in it, and I gladly embraced it. I started to really, really understand the depth of my connection to this land. So I began to identify as Israel, and then, man, just as soon as I had this revelation that you are Israel, I met my wife, Liz, or Lizu is her full name, and we met in a home group, and yeah, there's a lot to say about that, and that's been a huge part, obviously, of my life, and actually the reason why I can now live in Israel. You start to get a context for everything that happens in Yeshua's life is so, from the foundation of the Bible, and I had neglected that for so long. So coming to Israel really awakened that. And that has just been a huge part of my journey. And even why, now I write music the way I do. I even like the revelation of his name, the name of the Father, Yud He Vav He. When I first saw those letters in Hebrew, I was shocked. He actually has a name, not just a title, Lord or God. And it's funny how I had missed that. And I wonder how many people out there miss that. And it's really, really important, I think. And, even when I discovered that, and I went right away and onto the internet and wanted to find music where people were singing his name. And there was like nobody at that time. So you can guess why when I decided to do music, first thing I wanted to do was use his name. When I started recording, it was actually very difficult, and I knew it would be challenging, learning the software, and it's very technical, and I didn't have any training, and I was training myself, and I didn't really enjoy that aspect, is the technical aspect. I just wanted to worship. The hardest part, though, was to actually bring that live energy and life of playing live for people into the recording. Like you're standing in front of the mic and you're supposed to sing into this mic and sound genuine, and it was very, very difficult at first. So, and very difficult to learn to record. It was like learning another instrument. It wasn't natural for me. It's something I had to learn a lot by trial and error. And even now, I might try 10 things before I get the one sound or the one melody that I want. And it can be a long process of a lot of things you throw out. And so, but it gets better and easier with time. The more I'm writing, the more I feel led to write about prophetic scriptures, about, especially about the day of Yah, which is the day of the second coming of the Messiah, of Yeshua. And I think the more I meditate on those scriptures and write about those scriptures, the more I feel I'm prepared for what's coming. And the more I think people will be prepared if they have the right perspective. And if you know what time you're living in and how late the hour is, the thief won't break in and steal from you. And so there's a sense of urgency even in, I think, some of the songs I'm writing, and for people to know the times they're living in and to be encouraged to overcome and to endure to the end, and with joy and with confidence. And I think that's what I would love the music to do, is to really empower the people of Elohim to overcome to the end, that their eyes would be fixed on the prize and they would never give up.
When we hear the angel say no more delay, oh, our hearts are longing.